Right now, as you watch this, the nearest human beings to one particular spot in the Pacific Ocean are not on a boat. They're not on an island. They're in orbit, about 250 miles straight up aboard the International Space Station. That's how far from everything this place is. The closest people are in space. Welcome to Point Nemo, the loneliest spot on Earth, and the graveyard where spaceships go to die. Point Nemo isn't an island. It isn't a landmark. You could sail right over it and never know it was there. It's just a set of coordinates, 48 degrees south, 123 degrees west, in the empty heart of the South Pacific. What makes it special is a single lonely distinction. It is the farthest point in the entire ocean from any land on Earth. Geographers call it the Oceanic pole of inaccessibility. The nearest dry land is over 670 miles away, about 700 kilometers. And it isn't one coastline, but 3 tiny scattered specks. To the north, Ducie Island, a dot in the Pitcairn chain. To the northeast, Motu Nui, a rocky islet off Easter Island. And to the south, Maher Island, off the frozen coast of Antarctica. 3 uninhabited dots of land, each more than 1,000 miles away. In every other direction, there is nothing but open water for as far as the curve of the planet will allow. And here's the detail that really captures it. The nearest permanently occupied place to Point Nemo isn't on the map at all. When the International Space Station passes overhead, the astronauts inside, roughly 250 miles up, are closer to Point Nemo than any other human being on the surface of the planet. The empty quarter of the ocean, and surprisingly, it took until 1992 for anyone to actually pin it down. It was found not by a sailor, but by a survey engineer named Hrvoje Lukatela. He never went there. He calculated it, using a computer program that modeled the curvature of the Earth to find the precise point of maximum distance from every coastline at once. He named it Point Nemo. Nemo is Latin for no one, and a nod to Captain Nemo, the reclusive sea captain from Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. A fitting name for a place where no one lives, and almost no one ever goes. And there's a stranger coincidence buried in fiction. Decades before Lukatela ran his numbers, the horror writer H.P. Lovecraft placed Arlia, the sunken city of his monstrous god Cthulhu, in the South Pacific. The coordinates Lovecraft invented, back in 1928, sit only a few hundred miles from Point Nemo. He had no way of knowing he'd dropped his sleeping monster almost exactly on the most isolated spot on Earth. But Point Nemo's real story isn't fiction. It's about what falls out of the sky here. Because this point is so far from any shipping lane, any flight path, any living person, it has become the perfect place to drop something very dangerous: spacecraft. When a satellite or a space station reaches the end of its life, it doesn't just vanish. It has to come down. And large spacecraft don't fully burn up on re-entry. Chunks survive, sometimes pieces the size of a car. You cannot let those pieces fall on a city. So space agencies they time a controlled re-entry so that the surviving debris rains down into the one part of the ocean where it is least likely to hit anyone. That target zone is centered on Point Nemo. Officially, it's called the South Pacific Ocean Uninhabited Area. Unofficially, it has a much better name: the Spacecraft Cemetery. Since 1971, somewhere between 250 and 300 spacecraft have been deliberately crashed here. Cargo ships, satellites, rocket stages, and entire space stations. Russia is the largest contributor by far, with close to 200 pieces, including 6 Salyut space stations and dozens of Progress cargo freighters. Europe's ATV resupply ships and Japan's HTV freighters were sent here too. The most famous resident is Mir, the Russian space station that orbited Earth for 15 years. In 2001, it was guided down into these waters, breaking apart in a fireball as it fell. Burning fragments lit up the sky over the South Pacific before plunging into the sea. And the cemetery's largest occupant hasn't even arrived yet. The International Space Station, about the size of a football field, weighing around 420 tons, is scheduled to be deorbited around the year 2031. It will be the single largest object humans have ever brought back through the atmosphere on purpose. NASA has commissioned a special vehicle just to guide it down safely. And the bullseye is Point Nemo. When it comes, the station that has carried humans continuously for over 2 decades will break apart in the upper atmosphere and scatter across this empty stretch of ocean, joining the machines already resting on the seafloor below. Though, there's a twist. Some U.S. lawmakers are now pushing to delay that ending to keep the station flying until a commercial replacement is ready. So the exact date may slip, but the destination almost certainly won't. When the ISS finally falls, it's coming here. So what's it actually like down there, at the bottom? The water above Point Nemo is famously empty of life. It sits inside the South Pacific Gyre, a slow, swirling current that walls the region off from nutrient-rich water. Combined with the sheer distance from any land, very little grows here. It's one of the most biologically barren places in any ocean on Earth, which makes it strangely fitting. A dead zone on the surface, a graveyard of machines on the seafloor, nearly 4 kilometers below. The quietest place on the planet and humanity's most remote junkyard, all at once. And there's one last mystery worth mentioning. In 1997, ocean sensors picked up one of the loudest underwater sounds ever recorded, coming from a region not far from Point Nemo. Scientists nicknamed it the Bloop. For years it fed wild theories. A sea monster, something massive and alive down in the dark. The real answer turned out to be almost as dramatic. The sound of a gigantic iceberg cracking apart against Antarctica. Even the monsters here are made of ice. Point Nemo, the farthest you can possibly get from everyone else. So far from land that the nearest people are in orbit. So isolated that we trust it to catch the things we drop out of the sky. The loneliest spot on Earth, and the place where spaceships go to die. If you made it all the way out here with me, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell me in the comments. Would you take the voyage to Point Nemo? Thanks for watching.